Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I'd like to rise on this bill and second the remarks of my good colleague from the Northern Territory, Senator McMahon, in relation to the importance of biosecurity and the importance of the broader agricultural industry across Australia. For those who are regular listeners to Senate FM, they will note that I will bore for Australia about the yellow crazy ants. Now, the yellow crazy ants are an invasive species that have come from somewhere. We think the east coast of Africa, and I'll tell you how bad these species are. And explain a situation of a local up south of Cairns called Frank Tuito. Now, Frank is what you call one of those true characters of far north Queensland. He is very frank in his views and very earthy in his approach to politicians. Now, Frank woke up one night, as you sometimes do, because he could feel something moving across his face. And he sort of wiped it away, and what was happening is that a swarm of yellow crazy ants were deciding that his face was going to be a nice resting place. And what the yellow crazy ants like to do is they don't bite, but they spray like a form of acid on their prey to immobilise them. And Frank was actually temporarily blinded for a number of weeks because of the acid that had been sprayed on him by the yellow crazy ants. Frank also has a number of dogs that he uses for hunting wild pigs, wild boars, and the yellow crazy ants were able to get into their nostrils and destroy their sense of smell, which unfortunately meant that the dogs were not particularly efficient at chasing wild boars. This is just one example of what the impact of yellow crazy ants on one individual. There are super colonies, and that might sound a slightly emotive language, but super colonies of yellow crazy ants that have formed up in the tropics. And luckily, a number of people, Frank Tuito, there's a staffer for the Wet Tropics Management Authority, a lady by the name of Lucy Carger, who have been leading the efforts to fight against yellow crazy ants. And the local federal member up there, Warren Ench, has been particularly strong in advocating down here for extra funds to make sure that we can try and stop these super colonies from growing and developing and actually wipe the super colonies out. So that the federal government, and in conjunction with an amount of funding from the state government, have spent millions of dollars baiting these super colonies, baiting the yellow crazy ants, not just through using what used to exist in terms of the Green Army, but also by using helicopters to drop the baits into wild areas, because unfortunately the yellow crazy ants didn't just stay in and around the southern parts of Cairns, around Gordonvale and Edmonton. They actually got up into Kuranda, and hence the interest of the Wet Tropics Management Authority. Because this invasive species, you might think it's just a little ant, it's actually quite a tiny ant, can't do much damage. But when they form these super colonies, they have the ability to wipe out the native animals of far north Queensland. And I understand, I know this is not a point for partisan politics, but I know that the Labor Party have also supported the granting of money to local groups up there to fight this scourge of yellow crazy ants. And that's why it is so important that we do everything possible to streamline and utilise our biosecurity measures, because Australia is one of those rare countries around the world, and that we have such a pristine natural environment where invasive species, notwithstanding the aforementioned yellow crazy ants, where invasive species are kept at a minimum because of our biosecurity measures. And it's not just because we don't want to wake up in the middle of the night with a swarm of yellow crazy ants deciding to nest on our face and temporarily blind us. It is because of the importance of the agricultural industry to Australia. Now, we all know that back in the 1950s and 1960s, Australia rode on the back of the sheep's back. And now we still ride on the back of the sheep and on the back of cattle, and we also ride on the fields of barley and maize and wheat and sugarcane, because our total farm production is estimated at $62 billion. Now that is a lot of money in anyone's terms. It's many lotto rollovers on a Saturday night. But in terms of the potential that is there for our agricultural sector is so important. Our exports are valued at $49 billion, and that's almost up 27% since we came to office. Now, this bill is so important because in terms of how it can help protect our agriculture sector. Now, we've done a number of things over the years since we came to power in 2013 to protect and grow the agricultural sector, but also to grow our biosecurity measures. Now, in the 2019-2020 financial year, the government has made available $852 million for biosecurity to maintain our strong pest and disease-free status and support agricultural trade. Senator McMahon mentioned before the threat to our pork industry in terms of swine flu, in terms of the damage that has previously been caused and could be caused if our pork industry is wiped out. We're spending $29 million to strengthen our agriculture export trade through developing an international, competitive and profitable horticultural sector and working to minimise the impact of non-tariff measures. And that's particularly important in terms of our trade with some of the Southeast Asian countries. And what is interesting is when you travel around Queensland, which I do as a Senator for Queensland, is that all farmers, yes, do have one eye to the horizon, to the clouds, to see if rain is coming, but they also have one eye open to where the markets are, and that the days of where farmers would necessarily just trade with each other are still there in certain small quantities. But so many farmers are dependent on our ability to trade, not interstate, but overseas. For Queensland farmers know that their ability to grow their farm, to grow their property, comes from their ability to export their goods overseas to that growing market in Southeast Asia and also across in terms of South Asia, in Sri Lanka and India. But it's not just agriculture, it's not just biosecurity and trade where we're spending money to ensure the future of our important agriculture sector. It's also in terms of what's happened with the drought. And as much as I've bored about yellow crazy ants in this place for many years, I'd also bored for many years about the impact of the drought in Queensland. It was only about 2 years ago where the drought came onto the national stage. For many people in Queensland who at that point had been living in drought conditions for up to 6 or 7 years, it was a little bit like, well, welcome to the party, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we've been dealing with. You know, there were kids in Queensland, in Western Queensland, who had never actually experienced rain. You know, we're talking about 6, 7, 8-year-olds who had never experienced rain. Such was the length of the drought, and such was the impact upon the drought on local communities. And you just think about that. You're trying to explain to a child, you know, there's a thing called rain, and it's just something that they see on the television. So we're spending not just millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars, we're spending billions of dollars over the coming years to help drought-proof Australia and help ensure the resilience, which is probably a word that is overused, but ensure the future of farming in this country. You know, this country is a dry country. You know, I live out in the Darling Downs. I live in an area that has been drought declared for a number of years. And even though in the last 4 weeks we had as much rain as we received in all of last year, we're still a drought-declared area, because what's happened now is we've got what's called a green drought. The grass is green, the grass has grown a bit, but until we get more sustained rain and the restoration of the normal rain patterns, then we are in a green drought. But this bill, the Agriculture Legislation Amendment Streamlining Administration Bill, to give it its full title, is something that's going to assist the efficiency and effectiveness of our biosecurity system by authorising automated decision-making for decisions made by biosecurity officers under the Biosecurity Act 2015. And that may not sound that particularly exciting to those listening at home, but to those who are sitting on their tractors, this is very exciting. For those who have come in to have a lunch break, this is particularly exciting news, because what the government is doing is ensuring that we are making our biosecurity system more efficient. When you consider the trade that not only leaves this country but comes into this country, and this is sometimes those on certain sides of politics, the far left and far right, don't understand that trade means we can export our brilliant produce around the world, but it also means we do need to import. But we need to make sure that our imports that come into this country are properly go through the proper mechanisms, through the proper screening, through the proper processes to make sure that we do not get invasive species like the yellow crazy ants coming into this country and allowing them to damage and destroy our agriculture industry. Now, the approach of this bill will be to support deregulation and improve the effectiveness of the biosecurity framework and the imported food system. The bill is urgently needed to enable the use of current technologies to effectively and efficiently enforce biosecurity controls over vast cargo volumes that may pose a high biosecurity risk to Australia. Now, briefly, I did reach the dizzying heights of Assistant Minister for Immigration and lofty heights. And what was interesting about that, working under Minister Dutton, was going and looking at our airports and looking at our ports in terms of the huge volume. Sometimes we forget about it, but the huge volume of produce that actually does come into this country. And we realise that we rely so much on technology in terms of screening, seeing what's there. We rely so much on the professionalism and the hard work of those staff who are on the front line fighting against bad things trying to come into this country. Because we do put invasive species into the category of bad things, considering they pose such a threat to the economic security of this country. And that's why this bill is so important. The Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment processes an average of 45,000 commercial cargo referrals each month. Now, that is a lot, and that is why this bill is needed. Senator McMahon talked about the brown mammorated stink bug. Well, I'm just going to call it the stink bug. In terms of the, it does have an acronym, but I'm just going to call it the stink bug. In terms of the impact that stink bug can have on our, I don't want to say our biosecurity, on our home. Biosecurity is just about protecting our home. And what this bill does is make sure that the screens that we have around our homes, the guard dogs, the burglar intrusion systems, and the security cameras are all working efficiently. And that's why this bill is a good bill, and it's a bill that is needed to make sure that our agricultural sector is protected, that jobs are protected, that small businesses are protected, and that the security of Australia, one of those rare countries around the world where we have such a pristine environment and we are so strong in protecting this environment, because we know it is so important